It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 30, looking at the players of the 2025 Gold Cup. This episode is looking at the players of Suriname. Part 2, the selection. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin and this is Series 30 on the players of the 2025 CONCACAF Gold Cup. This episode is the second part of our coverage of Suriname's players. The final roster is released and we are looking at Suriname selections. In part 1, we compiled a list of players and their likelihood of reaching the final squad, and that was based mostly on their participation since the 2023 Gold Cup, or just after that, since Suriname was not involved in that cup. So that would be the fall 2023 Nations League games. Then we begin with Suriname. We considered a few other factors beyond their participation in those games, and we also gave some biographical and career information on the main players. So in part 2 here, our focus is on the final squad. This mediacast is divided into 3 sections. Section 1 is some preliminary information on the team. We actually do repeat some of what we said in part 1, but we do that more quickly. We want to create a narrative for the position summaries in section 2, so the information in section 1 provides a framework for that. Section 2 is the main part of the mediacast. We review the list that we compiled in part 1, and we will tell you who made the preliminary and final squad. We also try to predict starters, and to do that we examine each position and tell the story of who has played in the role over the recent period. And we'll also look at the lineups for the warm-up games to see if they give any clues as to who will start. And in section 3, we will start with a spotlight review. That's a quick summary of the players who made the squad and our predicted starters. So basically a race through summarizing section 2. And we'll also review surprise selections and non-selections and new players, as well as updating on injuries, which we talked about at the end of part 1 there. So let's jump right in. And we begin with section 1, some information on the team. So in part 1, we did actually start with some big names who are off the squad. We won't repeat that here, but we will tell you that the final squad has 26 players, and Suriname put out a 49-man preliminary squad. So they had to cut 23 players to create the final squad there. Moving on to games, I'll just tell you that in part 1, we also looked at the games over the period, and we will review that here. Also in part 1, at the beginning of section 2, we looked at the managerial situation over the period in detail. Here we're going to combine those two because, again, it sets up a framework for better understanding the position summaries in part 2. We'll also review formations, which also helps with that, but we are going to go much faster than in part 1. So we begin with the manager going into the period. That was Aaron Winter. Suriname did not make it to the 2023 Gold Cup. However, they played the 2023 Nations League group stage. That's 4 games in September and October 2023. Manager Aaron Winter departed after that. They didn't have any games in November for the Nations League finals, and so weren't part of the Copa America either. And they did find a new manager before playing their next game. That next game was a friendly in March of 2024. And their next games then were in June of 2024. That was the beginning of CONCACAF World Cup qualification. Okay, not the beginning because there were a few preliminary games, but for most teams, it was the beginning. That's 2 games in June of 2024. The 2024-25 Nations League group stage was 4 games in September and October of 2024, so in the fall of 2024. That time they did reach the quarterfinals, and they played 2 games in November of 2024. For that one, and they lost to Canada, so we're out of the competition there. Winning in November would have earned them qualification for the 2025 Gold Cup, but because they lost, they had to kind of continue on to another playoff. So they were in March of 2025, 2 playoff games for the Gold Cup, which they won, and so here they are in the Gold Cup. That is our race through recent games that we'll be talking about. And then for formations, we have their primary formation was a 4-2-3-1, and they used that especially in the second half of the period. And they had 3 other formations. I guess the secondary one was a 4-4-2 formation, which they used in 4 games, or 28% of the games. So 8 games of the 4-2-3-1, 4 games of the 4-4-2, and then they used 2 other formations besides, which we won't get into. When we analyze this, we'll say almost always 4 at the back for Suriname. So actually, it was just in the very first game was the only game with a 3-man defense. After that, it is 4 at the back, meaning 2 central defenders with a right back and a left back. Okay, and up front, it's about 50-50 as to whether, no, it isn't. It's about a quarter of the games. So almost 30% of the games they use 2 forwards, but otherwise most of the time it's just a single forward. All right, let's do our last order of business here. That's a look at the warm-up games they played. The first one was, it says June 5th here, but I think it might have been June 6th. They played the last 2 games of round 2 of 3 of World Cup qualifiers. And that one was against Puerto Rico at home. They won that 1-0. And then in the second game, a much tougher game, they played El Salvador away, but they did very well there. They tied that 1-1, which meant that they actually won the group over El Salvador, although both of them advanced. So a good performance there by Suriname. And those acted as warm-up games for this cup, so also a good showing going into this cup. All right, we move on to section 2. The candidates, we compiled a list in part 1, so now we're going to go over that list again. As I said, we did spend a lot of time talking about the managerial situation. We won't do that again here, but what we will say is that Stanley Menzo is the manager leading them into the cup here. So we will consider him as having been selected. Let's move on to goalkeepers. And here we had a definite candidate in Warner Hahn, and he was selected for the squad. And we had 2 likely candidates, Etienne Vaysen and Jonathan Fonkel. So both of those selected for the final squad. You might think that's it because most teams just bring 3 goalkeepers, but no, Suriname is bringing 4 keepers to this cup. So our first possible candidate, Ishan Court, also making the final squad, but the other possible candidate, Janilo Weigel, just making the preliminary squad there. Okay, let us talk about the position in our little story over the period. So Warner Hahn started all the 2023-24 Nations League group stage games. That was in the fall of 2023. But under the new manager, Etienne Vaysen played the World Cup qualifying games. Then the 2 of them shared the 2024 Nations League group stage games, each of them playing 2 games. Wesen played the Nations League quarterfinal games against Canada, but Hans started the March Gold Cup playoff games against Martinique. So coming out of Section 1, we don't really feel we can say there's a definite starter there. Actually, what we think is going to happen is an alternation of Werner Hahn and Etienne Wesen. Let's see if the warm-up games changed our mind. Well, we do have Wesen starting the first one and Werner Hahn starting the second. So that basically confirms our prediction of alternation between Werner Hahn and Etienne Wesen. We'll see if that continues in the Cup. But meanwhile, we will move on to the defense and central defenders. So here we had a definite candidate in Shaquille Pinas. And I'll just say his name is in gray if you're watching the YouTube feed, kind of light gray, indicating that he has not been through a tournament. If you see black, like we did with Werner Hahn, a black text, then that means they have tournament experience. Most of these players don't. So definite candidate Shaquille Pinas was selected for the squad there. And two likely candidates. The first one, Mienti Abena. Mienti Abena was selected for the final squad. However, the other likely candidate, Stefano Denswil, not selected, just selected for the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut. We had no candidates at the possible level. At the possible but unlikely, we had Illyrio Belfour. He made the preliminary squad, but not the final cut. And Ryan Donk, seemingly off the squad, kind of proves that he is Ryan Donk, not selected for the team, for even the preliminary squad. So wow, just two central defenders there. Let's take a look at the story over the period. As we said, in the first game of what we're looking at here, September 2023, they used a three-man central defense. So that was Stefano Denswil in the middle, Shaquille Pinas on the left, and Mienti Abena on the right. It was Denswil and Abena who carried on as the two-man pairing for the rest of those games, and they continued all the way until the fall of 2024, the second game of the Nations League games in September of 2024. And there we see Shaquille Pinas replacing Denswil, with Abena partnering him twice, but right back Liam van Gelderen getting a start alongside Pinas in central defense. Denswil and Abena returned, though, as a partnership for the Nations League quarterfinal games against Canada. But in the March games, it is Pinas with a different partner. One time it was Van Gelderen again, but it was actually Malone, who we're going to meet soon for the second one. So a bit of a strange choice there. But there we go. But Denswil not selected for the squad, leaving us with just Pinas and Abena there. Let's take a look at the recent games. So no, I'll just tell you, we considered Pinas a likely starter there, and Abena and Denswil possible starters, and then we consider kind of right back Liam van Gelderen a more of a backup player. We don't really, even though he started twice, we don't really expect to see him in central defense. Mind you, given the lack of players there, he well might. So that's what we came out of part one with. Let's see if the recent games change our opinion. Well, in the first game, we have Pinas alongside Van Gelderen. So Van Gelderen really looking more like a central defender here than a right back, as he is coded. In the second game, it is what we would expect, really, Pinas again and Abena. So I'm going to make a couple of changes because It looks like Shaquille Pinas is a definite starter, especially given the lack of candidates here. We have to remove Stefano Denswil from the list because he wasn't on the final squad. And so we'll put Mienti Abina and right back Liam Van Gelderen as likely starters. I mean, they haven't used a lot of players besides. So there is our kind of revised version here. And come on, graphics, work. Okay, there we go. That's what we have. Wow, I'm really surprised at the lack of candidates there, because usually teams have bring five or six players. Mind you, we do have a couple of new candidates in left defense coming up, and maybe some of those will fill in. But let's look at our left back situation. And here we have two definite candidates. The first one is Rigiusiano Haps, a definite candidate who was selected for the final squad. And then Javencio van der Kust. Also selected, and we're going to see Van der Kust kind of moves around the field. In fact, a lot of the Suriname players do play in different positions. So both of those definite candidates selected. We have no other players anywhere on the list. However, we do have two new players coming in. So we have Yannick Leliendo, and we have Jean-Paul Boetius, actually coded as an attacking midfielder. I'll explain shortly why we put him here. These are new candidates, so we will introduce them. Yannick Leliendo is 23 years old. He has no caps for Suriname. He was born in the Netherlands and plays for Volendam in the Netherlands since 2024, Utrecht before that, and never appeared for the national team, even on the bench, before being named to the preliminary squad there. So brand new Yannick Leliendo. The other one is Jean-Paul Boetius, and Jean-Paul Boetius is 31 years old and has no caps for Suriname either. Also born in the Netherlands, but plays for Darmstadt in Germany since 2025 and Hertha Berlin before that. For 3 years. He too never appeared for the national team, even on the bench, prior to being named to the national team there. So again, these players may strengthen up the central defense. Jean-Paul Boetius is an interesting case because even though he's coded as an attacking midfielder, he showed up in the second game as a left back. So despite all the candidates they have, Haps, Van der Kust, and the newcomer Leliendo, they put an attacking midfielder as a left back for the first game. So I wonder if he's miscoded and is there to shore up the defense. We'll have to see. Meanwhile, we will talk about the summary of the situation. I guess I jumped ahead there talking about the recent warm-up games, but let's go back to the beginning of the period. And in the first game, the left-back position becomes left winger with the 3-2-2-2-1 formation. The first game in the fall of 2023, and it's Kenneth Powell, who is coded as a left back too, actually, but we moved him to defensive midfield because that's where he usually is during this period. However, he's playing the left wing position. And then after that, it's centre back Shaquille Pinas in the second game. In September, so a bit of craziness there. But we get back to normality with Rigiusiano Haps playing in the last two. So that's kind of where we expect to see him. And in fact, Haps continues for the first June 2024 World Cup qualifying game, and Javencio van der Kust gets the second game there, perhaps getting a bit of training because it was an easy debut against a weak Anguilla team in the second there. Van de Kos, though, does play the first game of the 2024 Nations League group stage games in September, but Haps then starts the other three and also plays the November games against Canada and the March 2025 game. So by the end, Regiciano Haps kind of solidified in the position. And so, well, we're a bit cautious here. We don't quite want to say that Haps is a definite starter. So we're going to say he's a likely starter. And then we're going to consider Davencio Van de Kos kind of the backup player in the position. Let's see if the recent games, the warm-up games, change our opinion. Well, it is Haps in the first game, as we would expect, but then in the second game, as I said, this unusual selection of Jean-Paul Boetius, an attacking midfielder. So not that sure what's going on there. Does that change our opinion on our predictions? Not really. We might add Boetius as a backup. I kind of have the feeling that maybe he is a defender and is miscoded as an attacking midfielder. I'm not dead sure. Okay, that is it for the left side of the defense. Let us move on to the right. Okay. Over on the right, we have no definite candidate, but two likely candidates. The first one, Anthony Dijksteel, is a definite candidate. Oh, sorry, a likely candidate, and he was selected for the squad. And the other one we've actually met, sometimes playing in central defense, Liam van Gelderen, who also was selected for the final squad. Possible candidate, Navajo Backboard. Navajo Backboard only selected for the preliminary squad there. And then we had two possible but unlikely candidates. The first, Sean Claber, not selected even for the preliminary squad. The second, Damil Dankerliu, was selected for the preliminary squad, but did not make the final cut. Let's go to the summary of the position. So it's actually Damil Dankerliu starting in September of 2023, but that is his last start for the team, and that's the 3-2-2-2-1 formation he pushed up to right winger in that first game. After that, it's Navajo Backboard starting the other three games in the fall of 2023. And then under the new manager, Anthony Dijksteel comes to play in the June 2024 World Cup qualifying games. In the fall of 2024 for the Nations League games, Dijksteel and left-back Davencio Van de Kos each play two games. And then Van de Kos goes on to start the Nations League quarterfinal games there, but Backboard returns to play for the two March 2025 games. So again, where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us unable to confidently name a definite or even a likely candidate there, but we do have possible candidates in Navajo Backboard and Anthony Dijksteel, with left back Davencio Van de Kos as a kind of a backup. Well, the selection changes our opinion there because Backboard was not selected for the final squad. But let's look at the warm-up games to see what happened. And we do see Dijksteel, our likely candidate, starting both of those games. So that changes our opinion. We move Dijksteel up to a likely starter there, and we got to remove Backboard from the list, so we'll have we'll regard Van de Kos as a backup. So yes, it looks like Van Gelderen doesn't start over here. Maybe we should have recoded him into a central defender because that is where he has been playing. Okay, that is it for the defense, and so we move on upfield to the midfield, the defensive end of the midfield. And I'll just quickly comment on the position here, the most outstanding feature is that mostly players coded as defenders are in the position. So a notable lack of midfielders on the team. So we have moved a couple of those defenders here if they played a lot in midfield and didn't play in defense. Okay. I'll also say that about 2/3 of the time it's a two-man midfield, but we won't get into that too much here. Let's look at the candidates, and we have a definite candidate in Kenneth Powell, who is actually coded as a left defender. We did see him as a left winger in one game, but he's primarily played in the midfield here. Here we have Dion Malone. And I said I was surprised, actually, that he started as a defender once, but I shouldn't have been because he's coded as a central defender. Again, we're moving him here because this is where he's played. He's a likely candidate, and he was selected for the final squad. And I'm not sure if I said for Kenneth Powell, but he too on the final squad. Our possible candidate is Serginho Edward. Silvinho Sejas, and he only made the preliminary squad. And the same is true of our possible but unlikely candidate, Serginho Edward, just on the preliminary squad there. And finally, Kelvin Leerdam, who seemed to be off the squad, at least made the preliminary squad there. So not out of the picture completely is Kelvin Leerdam, but not on the squad. So again, thin in this position with just two. But we do usually add central midfielders and consider them in the same breath, as it were. So let's look at the candidates for central midfield. No definite candidate there, but for likely candidate, we have Rensky Adipi, who did make the squad there. Not much of a starter is he. The possible candidate, Doraso Class, a bit more of a starter and selected for the final squad. We're actually going to go on to the left and right midfield and cover those positions here. So let's do it quickly. We have a possible candidate in Jaden Turfkruer, and he was selected for the final squad. And we have seemingly off the squad Yannick Wildshoot or Wildshut, and he was selected for the preliminary squad. Even though he seemed to be off the squad, he's not completely. And then for right midfielders, we have no candidates at all. So now we're ready to go back up and summarize the defensive midfield. And we have, oops, I got the wrong spot. We have Kelvin Leerdam starting the first three games in the midfield for the 2023 Nations League games, but those proved to be his last appearances there in the fall of 2023. He had been partnered with Rensky Adipi in the first two of those games, and then Dion Malone in the third. Then it was Malone and Kenneth Powell combining for the fourth game there in the fall. That was the last game under manager Winter. However, Malone and Powell continued in the midfield anyway. The June 2024 World Cup games, so Powell partnered now with attacking midfielder Emmanuel Ferre, who will meet soon. Both of those guys playing midfield in a 4-4-2 formation. Ferre remained for the September 2024 Nations League games, but now his partner became a new. He had a different partner in both of those games, but it came back to being Powell and Malone in the two October games, just as they had played a year before. Malone returned for the November game also, quarterfinal games against Canada, and here he was partnered by central defender Shaquille Pinas for both of those games. Then it came back to Powell and Malone for the first of the March 2025 Gold Cup playoff games, and Powell in the last game finally actually pairing with a player coded as a midfielder, and this was Doraso Class, playing alongside of him. So what do we get from all of that? A bit complicated there. Well, what we get is no definite starter. Usually when it's that complex, we're not seeing a consistent starter. But we do think Kenneth Powell and Dion Malone are likely starters, possibly pairing with each other as they did several times. Possible starters, though, are players that we saw come in and central defender Shaquille Pinas and central midfielder Dorazo Class as possible starters. Let's look at the recent games and see if that holds true. Well, we do have Powell and Malone partnering in the first game, so a bit of consistency there. But alas, in the second game, it changes to two different players, as it did so often during the period. Here we have Dorazo Class, and he's partnered by a player in the position for the first time, Montnor, who we're going to meet. He's a left winger, so we're going to meet him. So that leaves us a bit confused as to what's going on. So we'll basically stick with what we got here, but we will kind of move Dorazo Class up ahead of Pinas there, just because he seems a bit more likely having started in the second game there. Okay, and we're going to kind of see this continuing as we go upfield, because there are very few positions which are settled for Suriname, despite the fact that they're doing quite well. Let's move up to the attacking end of the midfield. Attacking midfielders, and we begin with left attackers, so up in the upper left quadrant of the field. This is where we have actually Jaden Montnor, who we just met as a central midfielder. He's coded as a left winger, but we moved him to the right wing because all of his starts, apart from this recent warm-up game, have been over there. So we will delay our introduction of him for a little while, and we will say the left attackers begin with likely candidate Jamilio Richters, who was selected for the final squad. However, the other likely candidate, Virgil Misijan, only selected for the preliminary squad there, not making the final cut. Possible but unlikely candidate, Dimitri Apai, not selected even for the preliminary squad, and nor were our two seemingly off the squad players, Diego Biseswar and Evenzo Convalius, neither of those making even the preliminary squad. Let's look at the situation, and I gotta tell you, it's a bit like the central midfield, defensive central midfield story, where it's just kind of players coming in and out. So we begin with attacking midfielder Diego Biseswar, but that was his last start for the national team in the first game in September of 2023. And we get forward Cleofilo Filter starting the second of those games. And then it was left back Juvencio Vandekos playing as a left attacking winger in both October games there in the 4-2-2 formation. Under the new manager, well, that formation and position continued, a 4-4-2, but now it's filled by right attacker Geraldo Becker in the first of the June 2024 World Cup qualifying games, and then Virgil Misijan in the second. For the rest of the games, the position is a 4-2-3-1 formation, so a left attacking midfield position, and Virgil Misijan continues there, filling it twice out of the 4 2024 Nations League games. And then Van der Kerst returns for one. And surprise, surprise, we have centre-back Shaquille Pinas coming in, filling the position. So all very confusing. Van der Kerst had the position for the November 2024 Nations League quarterfinal games, but right winger Jarano Kirk comes in for both of the March Gold Cup playoff games against Martinique. So obviously here, there's no definite or likely starter. and we can really only guess because it changes so much. We'll go with the most recent starters as the possible candidates. That's left back Van der Kerst and right attacker Girano Kirk, who we're going to meet soon. But let's look at the recent games and see if that sheds any light. In the first game, we have the forward Richenel Margaret starting there in the first one, and then Richters starting in the second game. Jamilio Richters, who actually is coded for this position and really starting for the first time in this period there. So very unsettled over here. And does that change our opinion of starters? Yes, it does. We are going to say that we have no idea. We're going to say the starter is undefinable because it seems to be a different player every time. So we'll have to wait to the games to actually see who does start. Okay, let's move over to the right side and look at the candidates here. So we have a definite candidate over here in Geraldo Becker. However, he did not make the final cut there. An injury concern, which we'll talk about at the end. Holy smokes, he was a definite candidate. Next, we finally catch up with Jaden Montnor, who we moved over here. He was a likely candidate and he was selected for the final squad. And so was the other likely candidate, Girano Kirk. And also we put over here the forward Richenel Margaret, because he is a candidate as a right attacker. That's the player we just saw starting on the left in the warm-up game. We also have a possible candidate in Roskello Vleiter. However, he was not selected even for the preliminary squad. And I should have made clear that Richenel Margaret was selected for the final squad. We do have two players also seemingly off the squad. The first one, Florian Josephzoon, and he was selected for the preliminary squad. So is the second one, Leandro Capel. So not completely off the team, those players, but not selected for the final squad. So let's look at the position here. And honestly, it's not a lot better than on the left side. Florian Josephzoon started the first two September games in the fall of 2023, but those would be his last for the national team. The same is true of Leandro Capel, who started both October games but didn't appear after that. Under the new manager, it's Girano Kirk getting the first start in the June 2024 World Cup qualifying games. And he played the first, and it was Jaden Montnor playing the second. And in fact, those two alternated in the September 2024 Nations League games. However, in September, it was Geraldo Becker starting both of those games, and he went on to start the November quarterfinals against Canada there too. Montnor did return for the first March Gold Cup playoff game, but Richenel Margaret got his debut start on the right side here. So, yeah, it's again maybe a bit more settled than the right side or than the left side, but still very difficult to predict a starter. So do we have any definite or likely starters? Well, no, we can't say we do. We can only list some possible starters. We would say Geraldo Becker, Jaden Montnor, or Richenel Margaret as the main candidates there. Girano Kirk has been playing on the left more recently. However, when we look at the warm-up games, I'm seeing Girano Kirk does start in his coded position, at least the first game. However, none of these start in the second game. It is left midfielder Jaden Turfkruer in the second game. So just as so none of the players that we listed as possible starters. So we're going to do the same thing on the right side as we did on the left and admit that we really don't know who it's going to be. It could be anyone. You know, and often these are out of position players. So not just any one of the candidates for right attacker, but really any one of the candidates for attacking midfield or forward there. So we wish we could be more clear, but we're just interpreting what we have. Let's move on to central attackers, and we'll talk a bit about the position. It could be used, this position, in the 4-4-2 formation that they used in the early part of the period. However, we did find that it was defensive players filling the role there, so we covered that with defensive and central midfielders. However, in the 4-2-3-1 formation, which they used in the last 8 games, this position is used. And it may actually be a player coded as a secondary striker. We have moved the one player coded as a secondary striker over to here. And or did we? We did not move him. So we will come to him. Anyway, let's look at the candidates we do have on our list here. We've actually mentioned Emmanuel Ferre. He started some games in the midfield there, but he did play a couple of games as central attacker too, or central attacking midfield. Emmanuel Ferre was selected for the final squad, and our likely candidate, Justin Lonwick, also selected for the final squad. And here we have a seemingly off the squad, Charon Cherry, and he was not selected even for the preliminary squad. So those are our candidates. Let's look at the narrative of the position. So central midfielder, Justin Lonwick, he is coded as a central midfielder, but he started the first 2 of the fall 2024 Nations League games. That was the first time the position was used. And Emmanuel Ferre started the October games. The position was not used then again until November of 2024, the November Nations League quarterfinal games against Canada. But here it was secondary striker Denzel Jubitana. We should have moved him here actually, but we'll meet him right away. And he played both March Gold Cup games there in March of 2025. Okay, so there we go. And we do see them using the 4-2-3-1 actually in both of the games here. And I'm just going to quickly go to secondary strikers and tell you that the one candidate there, Denzel Jubitana, who is at the likely level, was selected for the squad. So as I said, we should have moved him to central attacker here. Let's look at the recent games because they do use the position, and it is actually Jubitana in the first game and then Justin Lonwick in the second game. So actually players pretty much playing their coded position. We might have to consider recoding Justin Lonwick because he has been playing more as an attacker. Okay, that is it. We'll say that's it for the attacking midfield end of the field, and we will go to our forwards here. And oh no, I didn't predict starters for the central attackers. Well, if they do use this position, which seems likely, we're going to say, well, it could be any one of the 3 really. So we'll just say possible starters: Denzel Jubitana, Justin Lonwick, and Emmanuel Ferre. Maybe we can get a bit more specific and say that the first 2 of those, Jubitana and Lonwick, now seem a bit more likely, and it is likely that they will use that formation. So should be one of those 2. Okay, now we can move on to forwards, and let's begin by naming the candidates there. We have a definite candidate in Cleofilo Vleiter. and no surprise, he was selected for the final squad. We actually don't have any players coded as likely here, but we have 3 at the possible level. The first 2, actually, Dylan Vente, and no, just Dylan Vente. The first one was not selected even for the preliminary squad. The second one, Tyrone Conrad, did make the preliminary squad, but not the final cut. And the third one, Shaquille Stein, was selected for the final squad there. A bit of a newcomer to the team is he. And we have possible but unlikely Jeremy Hilterman, who did make the preliminary squad, but not the final cut. And then our seemingly off the squad, Mitchell Tavridi, does seem to be off the squad, as he was not selected even for the preliminary squad. Let's look at the position. It is a single striker in most cases, but they did use a 4-4-2 in 4 of the early games, so we may see a double striker situation, although they seem to favor the single striker. Let's look at the period, the position over the period. Gleofilo Vleiter started the first fall 2023 Nations League game, but he did actually become a left forward for the second, and Mitchell Tavridi stepped in for the second game, although that would be his last appearance. The October games featured 2 forwards, and it was right attacking midfielder Geraldo Becker joining Gleofilo Vleiter up top for both of those October games. Under the new manager, the 4-4-2 remained, so we have 2 forwards, but the players didn't. We have central attacking midfielder Justin Lonwick starting both of those players, both of those games, and he was partnered by players in just single appearances in the position for the June 2024 World Cup qualifying games. However, as one might expect, or I'll just call him Vleiter, returned, and he started all 8 remaining games as the lone forward. So all the fall 2024 games and the March 2025 games. So Gleofilo is one of the few positions where we can confidently predict a definite starter. Gleofilo Vleiter, and really nobody else. Maybe, you know, we did have Geraldo Becker and Justin Lonwick each come in for a couple of games. Perhaps those can be possible starters or backups, but we're really just going to leave it the way it is because it could be a variety of players. Let's look at the recent warm-up games and see who started. So it was Vleiter in the first of those games, but in the second game, it is Richanel Margaret playing in his coded position. We had moved him to right attacker. There he played everything but right attacker in these warm-up games, Richanel Margaret. However, it doesn't shake our confidence that Vleiter is the starter in this position. And that brings us to the end of section 2 and our look at the players who made it and didn't make it, and we move on to section 3, and here we want to welcome listeners to the short version of the mediacast. And what we're going to begin with is racing through a review of what we covered in sections 1 and 2 of the full version, so mostly section 2 there. Let's go back then and list at the list we compiled for our spotlight review. Beginning with the manager. So manager Stanley Menso, let's call him a selection for the final squad. He will be leading them through. And then we have goalkeepers. So we had a definite candidate in Warner Hahn and 2 likely candidates, Etienne Vaisen and Jonathan Funkel. And then and all 3 of those were selected, Hahn, Vaisen and Funkel. But surprisingly, they selected a 4th keeper as well. They can only have 1 in goal at a time. But the 4th keeper is Ishan Court. and he was selected for the final squad. The other possible candidate, Janilo Vigel, just selected for the preliminary squad. In terms of predicting starters here, we can't predict a definite starter because Warner Hahn and Etienne Vaesen have been alternating in the position, and that was true even in the warm-up games. So that's what we're predicting, is an alternation of Warner Hahn and Etienne Vaesen. Moving on to the defence for central defenders. Wow, we don't have a lot of candidates here. We have a definite candidate in Shaquille Pinas, and he was selected. The first of our likely candidates, Mienti Abina, also selected, but the second likely candidate, Stefano Denswil, not selected for the final squad, only for the preliminary squad there. We had also possible but unlikely candidate Illyrio Belfour, and he was selected for the preliminary squad. But one of their bigger names, Ryan Donk, seemingly off the squad now and not selected for the preliminary squad. In terms of our predictions for starter, we think Shaquille Pinas will be a definite starter. He actually starts in various positions, yes, we have him as definite. And then likely starters, just the two. We don't have a lot of candidates here. Mienti Abina, but also right back, Liam van Gelderen. We actually should have moved him over here because he played more in central defence. So we think he could be a starter. Over to the left back position. We had two definite candidates in Rigissiano Haps and Juvencio van de Kust. Both of those definite candidates and both selected for the final squad. We had no other candidates in part one, but in part two here we had two new candidates. So the first one is Yannick Leliendel, a new candidate, and the second one, John Paul Boetius. If you're looking at the YouTube, you may say, hey, he's coded as an attacking midfielder, and he is, but he started one of the warm-up games, in fact, his only start for the national team as a left back in the second warm-up game, so we are as confused as you. In terms of starters, we would almost call Rigissiano Haps a starter, but we're cautious, so we're going to say he's a likely starter. And for backups, we have Juvencio van de Kust, who does play in other positions, and the newcomer, John Paul Boetius. We think maybe he was miscoded and is actually there to shore up the defence. We're not really sure. On we go to right backs. We had no definite candidates here, but two likely candidates, Anthony Dijksteel and Liam van Gelderen. Liam van Gelderen, again, playing more as a central defender. Both of those selected for the final squad. Possible candidate, Navajo Backboard, not selected for the final squad, just the preliminary squad there. And then we had two candidates, possible but unlikely. Sean Kleiber, not selected even for the preliminary squad, but Demille Dankerlew selected for the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut. For starters over here on the right, we have no definite starter, but we think Anthony Dijksteel is the most likely starter. And then backup is actually left back, Juvencio van de Kust there. On we go up to defensive midfield as we continue to race through our review. Here we had definite candidate Kenneth Powell, who was selected for the final squad, as was likely candidate Dion Malone, actually coded as a central defender, but playing in this position during the period. Those two selected then. Possible candidate Silvino Esejas only made the preliminary squad, and same is true of possible but unlikely Susinho Edward, and also seemingly off the squad, Kelvin Leerdam. All three of those making the preliminary squad, but not the final cut. Over here, well, we're going to go through the other positions before we make our predictions. So central midfielders, no definite candidate, but a likely candidate in Renski Adipi and a possible candidate in Dorasso Klaas. Both of those selected for the final squad. Left midfielders, we have Jaden Turfcrewer as a possible candidate. He was selected for the final squad, actually started as a right attacking midfielder in the second warm-up game, which confused us a bit. And we had seemingly off the squad Yannick Wildshoot, actually selected for the preliminary squad there, not making the final cut though. For the right midfield, we had no candidates at all, so we can go back to our predictions here. Once again, we're not we don't feel like there's a strong enough candidate to be a definite starter, but we do have likely starters in Dion Malone and Kenneth Powell. So we think that could be the midfield pairing. It was in the first warm-up game, but then we were thrown a curveball in the second one. So we think anyway that Duraso Class or Shaquille Pinas could be possible starters in the central midfield. Whew. On we go to attacking midfielders, and we begin with left attackers. We had no definite candidates here, but a likely candidate in Jamilio Richters, who was selected for the squad. But our other likely candidate, Virgil Misajan, not selected there, just making the preliminary squad. And then we had a couple of other players at the lower levels who didn't even make the preliminary squad. After looking at the situation over here, over the recent period and in the two warm-up games, we throw our hands up in the air and say, we don't know. It almost seems to be a new name every game, so we can't predict a starter. And actually, that's true on the right side as well. We have definite candidates. Geraldo Becker actually not making the squad. That's an injury concern, which we're going to talk about in that section. Our two likely candidates, though, did make it. Jaden Montnor and Girano Kirk have been selected for the final squad. And the possible candidate, Rishanel Margaret, was selected for the squad and, in fact, started both of the warm-up games there. However, the other possible candidate, Rosello Vleiter, not selected even for the preliminary squad. However, our two players seemingly off the squad, Florian Josephson and Leandro Capel, both of those making the preliminary squad, so not as off the team as they seem to be. We do have the central attacking position being used in a 4-2-3-1 formation, and we have a definite candidate, Emmanuel Ferre, who was selected for the final squad, as was likely candidate Justin Lonwick, selected for the squad there. And in this position, well, we really should have added secondary striker Denzel Jubatana to this list. We kind of did, actually, and Denzel Jubatana was selected for the squad. So 3 players here, and well, it seemed that each was as likely as the other to be starters. We had them all as possible starters initially, but then we saw that Jubatana started one and Justin Lonwick the other of the warm-up games, so we bumped them up to likely starters, but really could be any of the 3 of them. Let's move on to the forward position there. We have a definite candidate in Cleofilo Vleiter. No, and he was selected for the final squad, of course. No candidates at the likely level. 3 possible candidates. The first one, Dylan Vente, not selected even for the preliminary squad. The second one, Tyrone Conrad, made the preliminary but not the final squad. And the third one, Shaquille Stein, did make the final squad there. Our possible but unlikely candidate, Jeremy Hilterman, only made the preliminary squad there. And in terms of predicting starters, this is one of the few positions where we do feel confident that the definite starter is Cleofilo Vleiter. There is a chance that they may use 2 forwards. In that case, it really could be any of the names that we've talked about, because we've actually moved some of the forwards to left attackers and right attackers, always putting them in the position where they really started the most. All right, that is the end. We've made it through our spotlight review. And so we move on to other business in section 3. That business begins with our review of surprises. So first of all, notable non-selections. And here we have left attacker Virgil Misijan. We had considered him a likely candidate, but he was not selected for the final squad, just making the preliminary squad there. Next, we come to Geraldo Becker, which actually almost certainly seems more of an injury concern than a non-selection. He was a definite candidate, had started 10 of their 17 games and scored 2 of their 11 goals. I'm sure he would be called up. So I'll deal with the injury then here. He had been out with a knee problem in March of 2025, and he did seem to recover from that, but he barely played for his club, Real Sociedad. He was not called up by the national team, so I'm guessing the knee injury is still a concern. Or it could have been inactivity from his club, because one article I read suggests it is a bit of both, actually, citing him having just played 14 minutes over the last 12 games of the season and not even called up to the bench for the last 4. But I'm sure that would not be the reason for Geraldo Becker, and that concern over the knee is the thing. So we'll talk about, or we'll kind of place him in the injury section, but regardless, a notable non-selection, a big loss for them there. Surprise inclusions, well, we don't actually have any. All of our players coming from the possible level or above. We certainly have some surprise inclusions on the preliminary squad, which we won't get into here, but for the final squad, none. New players, we have 2. Actually, we did have 10 new players added to the preliminary squad, but only 2 were selected. So once again, we won't concern ourselves with them if they didn't make the final squad. We don't want to go through 10 names here, but we do go through 2 who are added to the squad. So first one is left back Yannick Leliandal. And we introduced him there. And Jean-Paul Boetius, coded as an attacking midfielder, we put him as a left back because he started the final warm-up game there. So 2 new players added to the squad. And then an update on injuries. Well, we talked about Geraldo Becker, so we'll just place him here, and we will consider him to have been dropped due to injury there. And one other player to talk about, Emmanuel Ferrai. Emmanuel Ferrai, the attacking midfielder, picked up an ankle injury that kept him out of the last game for his club last game of the season for his club. That was in mid-May. However, Suriname would have known about that before selecting the final squad. So the fact that he was selected suggests that they believe he can recover. So we will say an injury doubt, but still on the roster. Perhaps he'll miss the first game, or perhaps he'll be over his injury. But nevertheless, they have him there on the final squad. All right, well, that is it. That brings us to the end of our business. So let's go into our outro here. I'm just going to make a nice graphic for the YouTube watchers to go out on, and I do have something to say here as well. So always there are a few changes that happen between the naming of the final squads and the actual tournament, and just struggling with this graphic here. And so what we've decided to do is just before the Cup, we're going to do one media cast that kind of covers all of the teams and any changes that have taken place between the time when we presented part 2 and the beginning of the Cup. As I say, always a couple of changes, maybe players injured in training or pulled out for family reasons or what have you. So we will cover those. And otherwise, we hope that this look at Suriname in parts 1 and 2 here will make it more enjoyable for you to watch Suriname when they take the field. We would like to thank Future Bass for the wonderful music you hear in this podcast. The title is called Alone.